Welcome to Easier Said Than Done with me, Zubin Pratap, where I share with you the tens of thousands of dollars worth of self-development that I did on my journey from 37-year-old lawyer to professional software engineer. The goal of this podcast is to show you how to actually do those things that are easier said than done. Hey guys, just want to talk to you today about the 3 ways to execute on pursuing your goals. Now, most of us are pretty good at working out what it is we want to do, though we often don't actually go into the level of detail necessary. We're still reasonably good at figuring out directionally where we'd like to go. Unfortunately, where this all tends to fall down, and certainly what I've seen in so many of my coaching students over the years, is we have a directionally valid place we want to go or direction we want to go in, but we have no clear perspective or plan on how to go from where we are to there, right? We believe that it's all about just learning the technical skill or the coding skill or the communication skill or the language or the musical instrument, rather than, well, how do we learn? Or how do we build this business? Or how do we acquire this scarce resource? Or how do we go from A to B, right? So we know we want to go from A to B, but we really struggle with how. Now, broadly, there are 3 ways of getting anything done. Let me just switch my screen so you can see. And let me just change that so it looks a bit better. There you go. So broadly, there are 3 ways of getting anything done, right? The first is do it yourself. This is DIY. We all know this. The second is done for you, where someone else just gets it done for you. And we'll go through examples of all of this in a moment. And the third is done with you, right? Now, DWY, done with you, is the one that most people don't think about that much. And like I said, we'll talk about some examples, but it's really important to understand what your approach is going to be, right? Are you going to do this yourself? Can this be done for you, or will this be done with you? So let's step through each of these, because understanding each of them and when to apply and the trade-offs is going to be critical when designing the plan to execute on what you want to try and achieve. So DIY first, right? Done or do it yourself. Examples of this are, well, you need to go fill up fuel in your car. Of course, you're going to do that yourself, right? Or you want to, in most places, you want to make dinner or make lunch for yourself. You're going to do that yourself. You want to make a sandwich, you want to do that yourself. That makes perfect sense, okay? You also doing it yourself could happen in more specialized circumstances. So if you are a programmer and you know how to write some automation, great, you can do it yourself. But if you're not, you won't. Or if you're a digital marketer, you can do your own Facebook or Instagram or YouTube or TikTok ad campaigns. But if you're not, you can't DIY it, right? Often DIY is mentioned in the context of home improvement, like, can you do handiwork around the house, put up a painting, replaster your walls, stuff like that, right? So that's DIY. Now, when do you need to do this? Well, typically people do it DIY when they have the skills, they have the know-how, they have the time, and they don't want to spend the money, okay? Now, it is possible that you may have the know-how and the time, but you just don't want to, and you're willing to spend the money, but you're not willing to spend the time. Now, we'll talk about all of these trade-offs in a moment, right? So that's DIY. The second example is done for you. Now, very often, this is professional services. So if you don't want to DIY it, you could have someone else do it for you, but not in all circumstances. For example, you could always have someone drive you somewhere if you don't want to drive yourself. You could do this by taking an Uber. You can have your accountant do your taxes for you if you don't want to do your taxes yourself. You can go to a restaurant if you don't want to cook your own dinner and have someone else give it to you, right? You can hire a Facebook marketing person if you don't want to do the marketing yourself. You can have a video editor if you don't want to do the video editing yourself, etc. That's all done for you, okay? But here's the catch. Can you do things like lose weight, learn to sing, into shape for a marathon? Can any of these things be done for you? No, they cannot. Can you actually DIY? Well, this is where it gets really interesting, because you kind of have to DIY, but that only works. Remember, the 3 things we talked about in DIY is you have the know-how, you have the skills, you have the time, and you don't want to spend the money, right? So what happens if you don't have the skills and know-how, and it's not something that can be done for you, right? This is a situation where you can't have someone else do it for you because it has to be done to you or regarding you, and you don't have the skills. So that means you can't do it yourself and it can't be done for you. The only option then is done with you. So let's talk about some examples of done with you, right? If you want a six-pack, sure, you're gonna have to do it yourself. There's no one else that can do the stomach crunches. There's no one else that can go on the diet. But do you know what kind of diet is suitable for you? Do you know what kind of exercise done when is the right thing for you? Who's going to keep you motivated and accountable, right? That's when you get a gym instructor, right? You get someone who's a fitness instructor who can keep you accountable, give you the know-how you need, train you up on the skills so that then you can do it yourself. That's done with you, right? Done with you is an interesting category because this is the category that is only possible, or let me put it another way. This is the category that applies when the thing that needs to be changed or transformed or the outcome that needs to be achieved is completely you related, right? It is completely about you. Done for you, do it yourself, etc. The pure categories are usually external things, like your taxes is something else, your ad promotion campaigns is something else, the blog you want ghostwritten, something else, right? But if it's transforming you, then it always has to be DIY. You have to do the work yourself. But if you don't have the know-how, then you need done with you. So classic example of this, no matter which education no matter which school you go to, which college you go to, or whether you do a boot camp or whether you do something else, you have to do the study. You have to do the work, right? There is an element of DIY that cannot be gotten rid of because this has to do with you. If you want to lose weight, if you want to put on weight, if you want to change your life, if you want to change your mindset, you have to do the work. You want to become a tennis player, you've got to do the work. However, if you want to be a tennis player, if you want to be a pro athlete, you want to go into a higher level at work and you get a personal coach, that means not only are you DIYing it, are you doing it yourself, but you're also having someone else doing it with you, right? So DWY, done with you, is a very special category, and it always applies in the context of personal transformation or change, right? It is unavoidable when it comes to changing you and you don't have the skill sets, or you could try and figure out the skill sets, right? Every place in the world is walking distance if you have the time, right? So if you don't have the time, you don't want to waste time figuring it out, trial and error, blind guessing your way to success, but you want to make the transformation in your life, you're going to pay for the convenience of speed. You're going to pay for the reliability of somebody else who knows what they're doing. That's what done with you is, right? So those are the three types of ways in which you can achieve an outcome. There are only these three types, right? There's nothing else. I mean, there's luck, but you don't want to rely on luck because that's a pretty lousy plan. Now, let's talk about the trade-offs for each of these, right? For each of the three currencies, there are trade-offs. So let's take DIY, right? Do it yourself. It's typically the one that's going to cost you not a lot of money, right? Often just raw materials if it's physical work. Otherwise, it's just going to cost you time. Now, to me, time is the most important thing, but I recognize most people don't think like that. So a lot of people think, oh, DIY is the cheapest because I'll save money, but it could cost me hours and hours of time, right? Taxes is a classic example. A lot of people want to do the taxes themselves, and they'd rather spend the entire weekend doing that than pay somebody $500 or whatever it is to do your taxes. Totally understandable, no judgment, each person their own. But there are other people who'll be like, no, $500 is, about 3 hours of my time or 2 hours of my time. Or, if for some entrepreneurs, they value their time at not north of $2,000 per hour, they would never do this themselves. They would delegate as much of the stuff as they can because their time can be spent on revenue generating activities and so on, right? So businesses think like that, entrepreneurs think like that. Not everybody does. And so DIY can be money-wise the cheapest thing to do, but time-wise quite expensive. Energy-wise, also DIY could be quite expensive because you have to do it as opposed to somebody else doing it. So think about if you had to fix a plumbing problem in your bathroom, sure, you could spend the entire weekend figuring it out, or you could just get a plumber to come and fix it for you, even if you knew what to do. And meanwhile, you could go and hang out with the kids, or you could go and study something, or you go to school, or you go to work, right? That's exactly how DIY would end up working. So keep in mind there are three currencies that we all have in different degrees, okay? We all have time, money, and energy. And we all spend these three currencies in different ways in order to get the outcome you want, right? There's not a place in the world that you can't get to by road or boat, okay? Holiday destinations. Like from here in Australia, I could easily go to Sydney or I could go to Los Angeles by taking a boat. I could, right? Just go across the Pacific, get to Los Angeles, great, Bob's your uncle. But it would cost me a lot in time. Not the most convenient. That's why flights became such a primary mode of transport for business and other activity. It's because it's just more efficient. But yes, it costs more in money, but it costs a lot less in time. And that trade-off is something you need to be prepared to make when you're executing on your plan. So the third currency is obviously energy. Now, like I mentioned, you can save energy if it's things like plumbing or taxes or Facebook ad campaigns. But if it comes to your fitness goals, your intellectual goals, your career goals, there's no way that you can avoid doing the work yourself. So your energy is going to be expended no matter what, when it comes to you. So any category of activity which you normally look at as done with you, which is a personal transformation or personal change that needs to be created, you're going to have to spend energy as well. So this raises the question where I think a lot of people really struggle in thinking about this in a way that's non-emotional is what's the most expensive, right? It's a bit of a trick question because most people say DIY is cheapest. And I would disagree. I would say DIY is possibly the most expensive and the riskiest if you don't have the knowledge and the skill set. Right? Think about it this way. If you didn't know how to take apart your car engine and you did it, what do you think could happen? Right? It's very likely you'll never be able to put it back together again properly. And then it's going to be more expensive, get it fixed and sorted out. And in the meanwhile, your engine's in 600 pieces on your garage floor and you don't know what to do and you can't go anywhere in that car, right? That could happen in a DIY scenario. Now, if you had the right tools, skill set, know-how, time, patience, then sure, you can do it yourself. That's why I think it's a misnomer or it's a misconception to think that just because you didn't pay cash, it's not going to be expensive. You could bleed a lot of time. You could certainly bleed a lot of energy, and there's often a lot of downstream consequences. One of the downstream consequences is unexpected costs because your asset's out of action. So if your car's out of action, now you got to take an Uber. That's an unexpected expense, and you thought that it was going to be, costing you $0, right? That's not necessarily true. Or in the case of what I see often with my students in career changes, they've spent 3 to 4 years, and I did this myself, by the way. You spend 3 to 4 years bumbling about not really knowing how to do it, thinking you can figure it out on your own because you read some blogs that said you could figure it out on your own. And then what ends up happening is you don't succeed, or most people end up quitting because that's a rational thing to do when you don't find your way through it. Or you just get frustrated and overwhelmed, and that's why you quit. And that's a perfectly rational thing to do, unfortunate, but rational. Or you get there 4 or 5 years later, like I did. It took me unnecessarily long. And I say, great, okay, I may not have spent that much money on it, just a few $1,000s. But the truth is, had I spent about $30,000 properly or $20,000 properly, I could have probably become a developer maybe 2 years sooner than I did. And that would have been, several $100,000 extra, right? So in order to hold on to $10,000 or $20,000 cash, I ended up giving 6 figures up for a year or two, which makes no sense when you think about it, right? But that's how we train to think. So this idea that saving money is the least expensive option is incorrect. It is dangerous. It can be true if you don't have the money. Now, if you don't have the money, that's a different thing. It's just like if you don't have the time, then having somebody else do it for you is understandable because you don't have the resource that you'd otherwise want to spend. So if you don't have the money, it makes no sense for you to go into crazy amounts of debt or something. Sure, modest debt, that's up to you. That's you don't want to put yourself under strain, but you certainly can use debt to get an education. That's not uncommon. Not like in the levels of the US where you have 6 figures of debt and that's crazy and you spend 20 years paying it off. But borrowing $5,000 or something, or putting $2,000 on your credit card, sure, that makes sense, right? In your circumstance, not for everybody, but it depends on people. But the one thing we don't know how much time we have left is time. And think about it, guys. We can always earn more money with the right skills. We can always double our income or triple our income in 5 years by having the right skills. We will never be able to double or triple the amount of time we have left on the planet, no matter what we do. That's a one-way street, right? And we can always go to a bank and borrow money, which is what we all do when we want to buy a house, for example. But where are you going to go to borrow time? You can't do that, right? So you have to start viewing your 3 assets as, time, energy, and money as very strategic resources that you need to spend wisely and invest wisely. And there's a difference between spending and investing in order to get the goals you want. So, all of this to say that when you're executing on your plan, think about what's best for you. Should you do DIY? Should you do done for you? Is that even possible in your context? And should you do done with you? There are trade-offs. One, some could cost more money and save you time. Some could cost more time and cost you a lot of money, etc., etc., etc. And you can, have to work that out for yourself and understand the difference between spending and investing. It's very personal. It's very specific to you. Some people, like I don't spend a lot of money on things, but I do spend on musical stuff because I love playing the guitar. I love music and stuff like that. Now, to some people that would be an expense. To me, it's an investment because it's a source of great pleasure, relaxation, and value to me. I would never consider that an expense, right? But for me, buying yet another pair of expensive fancy sneakers would not be an investment for me because I don't attach much value to that. But for other people, it is an investment. For me, that would be a pure expense. So it's very personal, and you've got to be clear on your values, especially when executing your plan. Because if you're not clear on your values when executing your plan, what ends up happening is you get confused and torn in different directions. And you're not clear about the trade-offs you have to make. That can be very frustrating. You then start thinking things like, oh, I'll never do this. I don't have the money. I don't have the time. When in fact, we all have different levels of these three things, and we just have to choose what we want to spend, what knob we want to turn up and down based on what we have to get the goal. And there is a price to be paid for any goal, whether you want a six-pack, whether you want to save taxes, whether you want to double your income, whether you want to be redundancy proof or secure yourself in the job market. There is a price that has to be paid emotionally, physically, financially, time-wise, energy-wise, right? You have to put in the work. So hope that helps. Just wanted to share this with you, and I'll put the link to this document in the description below as well, in case you ever need to access it and think through what is right for you. All the best. Do it. Just subscribe. You got to do it.